Hello and welcome to the Dream Team Professor podcast. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the top players to target in game week 6 of Sun Dream Team. We'll get started as always with the fixtures from ffstuff.co.uk. But before we do, just to let you know, I'm filming this episode on Wednesday evening after the Champions League games. I'm unavailable for the rest of the week, so we're going to have to put this episode out before we know the results and the lineups of the Europa League games and the Europa League Conference games. So keep an eye on the lineups, on any injury news, but this has been filmed before those games, so do take that into consideration when you're doing your planning. So game week 6, we've got a double game week of Premier League fixtures and EFL fixtures. That will be a double game week for everyone apart from Spurs, Forest and Sheffield United. And I've shown on the screen the spread of fixtures across game week 6 and game week 7. Across these 2 game weeks, all of the European sides have 4 fixtures in the next 2 weeks, as well as Luton and Burnley, who have a rescheduled Premier League fixture, although I'm not sure if you're going to want to be targeting that one. I've ticked those teams on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on podcast platforms. It's Manchester City, Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Newcastle, Aston Villa, West Ham United and Luton and Burnley. They're the teams that will have 4 fixtures across the next 2 weeks. However, there are a few teams that have less. For example, Spurs, they just have the 2 fixtures where they're out. Nottingham Forest have 2, and Bournemouth, Wolves, Crystal Palace, Everton, Brentford, Fulham and Chelsea all have 3 fixtures. Now, we're mostly going to want to target the teams that have the Carabao Cup fixtures and the European fixtures, so 4 games. But there's one thing that I noticed when looking at those teams that have European football. So City, Arsenal, Brighton and West Ham, 3 of their 4 fixtures are away from home, whereas United, Liverpool, Newcastle and Villa play 3 out of their next 4 fixtures at home. So just one thing to consider if you're looking to bring players in. And I don't know how much weight you put on home fixtures, but personally I like to target these home fixtures a little bit more than the away fixtures. There might not be too much in it as an advantage, but it is always something that I do look out for. United, Liverpool, Newcastle and Villa play 3 of their next 4 fixtures at home. Some other teams that are fairly popular in the Dream Team game, but might not be so much now that we've got the European games going on. Brentford, they play 3 fixtures, which are Everton, Arsenal and Forest. Spurs just have the 2 fixtures. Now this is significant because obviously people like Maddison, a few defenders like Udogie or even Son up front have been fairly popular, but now you're going to have to weigh up whether or not you want to have these players that are going to play just the 2 fixtures when you've got teams like Arsenal, Liverpool, Newcastle playing 4. So that is one thing to weigh up where they're not in this EFL Cup. And then Chelsea, they've got some tough games, Villa, Brighton and Fulham. So again, it's whether or not you want to keep hold of those Chelsea players going into what could be quite tough games. Villa, Brighton and Fulham. In Chelsea's form, usually these games probably wouldn't be so bad for Chelsea, but the form they've been in recently or even last season, these look like pretty hard games on paper to me. Right, now onto the teams and the players that I think are best to target for game week 6. I'm going to start with Manchester City, who are on brilliant form at the minute. So like I said, they've got 4 fixtures for game week 6 through to game week 7. That's Nottingham Forest at home, Newcastle away in the Carabao Cup. They then have Wolves away and RB Leipzig away. So 3 away games in a row, and they actually play a 4th away game in a row with Arsenal. So it's Forest and then 4 away games: Newcastle, Wolves, RB Leipzig and then Arsenal. And that's actually followed by Brighton, Young Boys and Manchester United. So once you get to sort of game week 8, the fixtures do turn, but it is Manchester City that we're talking about. So are there really any tough games? I'm going to start off again. Haaland is always going to be, he would be in this top players to target every single game of the week. So I'm not going to bother talking about him at the minute unless anything significant changes. But he still is looking really good. So we're going to start things off with Julian Alvarez at 4.3 million. And I think he's probably the informed player of the season at the minute. So 4.3 million. He's got 29 points this game week. He got 3 bonus points, 2 goals, 5 shots on target and 2 tackles in his 90-minute appearance in the Champions League. And then he got 1 bonus point, 1 big chance created, 2 assists, and played the full 90 minutes against West Ham as well. He scored 4 goals and got 5 assists so far this season. And also he's taken pretty much all set pieces, apart from penalties. He's taken all corners and all free kicks. He's doing a really good job of them as well. I think he put in a really good corner for, I think it was Ake in that last Champions League game. And then he took a free kick against West Ham and hit I think it was either the post or the crossbar. So he's looking really, really dangerous. And he's someone that I don't think I can ignore much longer. So we'll come on to my team updates at the end. But Alvarez is firmly in my plans. And also, there aren't that many options at Man City at the minute. They've got a lot of injury problems. So it looks like they would normally rotate for that Newcastle Carabao Cup fixture, I think. But we've just seen that Bernardo Silva's now out injured. I mean, they've also got Grealish out, although he's back in training, and De Bruyne out. So at the moment, it looks like Alvarez is pretty safe as a pick. And actually, I'll come on to Kyle Walker next, but Kyle Walker, along with Alvarez and Ederson, have played the most Premier League minutes for Manchester City so far this season. Alvarez, Ederson and Kyle Walker have played 90 minutes in 5 games in the Premier League. So Alvarez and Walker are looking pretty nailed at the minute. Kyle Walker is 3.5 million and he's 26% owned. So he's the most owned City defender in the game. And he's got 28 points, making him the highest scoring Man City defender also. And these fixtures do still look pretty good. So Nottingham Forest at home, that looks like a really good fixture, both for Alvarez and Kyle Walker if they play. The Newcastle game, I'm just not that sure what they're going to do in terms of lineup. They still have got a fairly good squad. But like I said, I don't know how many options they have to sort of play that position that Alvarez is playing. So even if they decide to rest Haaland, do they then put Alvarez up front? It's a tough one. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have that Alvarez-Haaland combo. And I think you'd have to be quite unlucky for both of them not to feature in that second game. The reason also I like Kyle Walker so much is just because he's that much cheaper than the rest of the defensive options. He's doing really well this season, but probably the second most nailed defender I'd say would be Ruben Diaz. But it just comes up in a much higher price point than Kyle Walker. And like I said, Kyle Walker is the highest scoring defender for Manchester City at the minute. Diaz will cost you 5.1 million, whereas Walker's 3.5. So at the minute, I think Walker's a no-brainer if you wanted to get a Manchester City defender in your team. Rodri, someone that hadn't really seemed that appealing to me. Obviously, he started the season really, really well, but I kind of said, would he carry on getting these attacking returns? I wasn't so sure that he would. But it's looking like I was wrong, to be honest with you. So he's getting forward quite a bit, and he just scored a ridiculous goal in that Champions League game. He's now on 3 goals for the season, 1 assist, and he's on 7.7 points per game at the minute. So I do think that he should start to be considered as a serious option. But 4.2 million, he's 1.1 cheaper than Alvarez, and personally I'd prefer to have Alvarez at this time. With the fluid formations now, the amount of formations you could have, I think I would choose Alvarez. But I still think Rodri would be a very, very good pick. I just don't think that he would play in that EFL Cup game, because they do have Calvin Phillips, even though he's not playing much at all at the minute. I think Kovacic is about to come back. I think he's back to fitness. And they also have Matheus Nunes as well, who could probably play that position. So there are quite a few options. I think Rodri probably does get a rest in that Newcastle game. Other notes, obviously Bernardo Silva, I mentioned, he went off injured in that last game, which makes people like Foden and Alvarez better options. I haven't actually put much down for Foden. He did have a good game in that Champions League game. He was quite disappointing against West Ham. But I think overall he's probably been quite unlucky, and he could have ended up with a few more points. He set up Haaland quite a few times in that West Ham game, but obviously Haaland missed quite a few big chances in that one. And also Foden put a really good cross in that Champions League game, and I think Haaland hit the crossbar. So on another day, I think Foden probably could have come out of a few more points. But with Bernardo out, I think Doku could be a good option still at 3.4. He didn't start in that Champions League game, which means maybe he'll get a start in this Premier League game. I think he might have started the last 2 Premier League games. So I think 3.4 million, Doku could be a good cheap way into the Manchester City midfield. But like I said, Jack Grealish is back in training, so eventually he is going to threaten the minutes of Doku and Foden. But overall, I think Alvarez, Walker, Rodri, and then maybe Doku are probably the best options at Man City at the minute. Then on to my team, Arsenal, and it was a lovely return to the Champions League with a 4-0 win against PSV tonight. And Bukayo Saka had an absolute blinder in that game. 6.2 million, and he got a goal and an assist in this one, so a great start to the Champions League campaign. And he's had a really good week, so 3 goals and 3 assists for the season. He got 10 points tonight against PSV with that goal and the assist, and 7 points at the weekend against Everton with 1 assist and 3 bonus points. So at the moment, Saka is looking like a really, really good option in midfield. I imagine most teams have got him. I think he's around 50% ownership, so actually only half of the teams, but I think people will be getting on him quite soon. A good alternative to Saka, if you didn't want to spend that much money, is Ødegaard at 5 million. I feel like we had this same situation last season where Saka was slightly more expensive, Ødegaard was a bit cheaper, but they both keep doing really, really well. 3 goals and 1 assist so far for Ødegaard, and he scored again this evening with a really good long-range strike, and he really must have been working on his goal scoring, because I think it was his first season for Arsenal, myself included, but a lot of Arsenal fans were complaining that he was a bit Ozil-like in that he didn't really like shooting too much, would always look for that one too many passes in my opinion. But now he's sort of taking shots from outside of the box. His first thought is to go for goal, and he's almost starting to look a little bit more Kevin De Bruyne-like. Might be a bit too flattering, but he really is looking good. 5 million, I think he would be a really good alternative to Saka. And maybe even, I don't think I'd do it myself, but maybe even you could double up with Saka and Ødegaard, but it would take up quite a big bit of budget. The fixtures do look quite good attack-wise as well. So Tottenham at home, I'm not being biased, I am an Arsenal fan. But the way Tottenham have been playing, they're really, really good going forward. But they are still giving away quite a lot of chances. And at home, I really do think that we can put quite a few goals past Tottenham. Maybe my prediction will be around 3-1 for Arsenal. Then Brentford away from home, I expect both Saka and Ødegaard to get rested for that one. But then it's Bournemouth away and Lens away. So 2 away games, but Bournemouth and Lens do look like good fixtures in game week 7. So I think Saka and Ødegaard are perfectly fine options in that midfield. Gabriel Jesus at 5.1 million. He got a start today, so he didn't start in that Premier League game, but he did get a start this evening. I think 5.1 is still looking a little bit expensive to me, just when you've got people like Alvarez performing and he's quite significantly cheaper. But he got 10 points tonight against PSV and did look very good. He got a goal, he had 3 shots on target, and I expect now that Gabriel Jesus is going to start the North London derby. I think he came off a little bit earlier, but I think I still would just wait for him to get that rhythm going and start playing twice a week. You've got Tottenham at home, I think he'll start. I think they'll rest him for Brentford. I think they'll play Nketiah in that one. He'll probably then play Bournemouth and Lens, but we've got Man City after that Lens game, so maybe there's a chance they rest him for that Lens game. I'm not completely sure, but I just want to see Gabriel Jesus fully fit, playing twice a week. So at the minute, I think I would pass on him, but he does look really good. I'm then going to come on to Arsenal's defence, and it's been back-to-back clean sheets for Arsenal. So clean sheet against Everton and a clean sheet against PSV Eindhoven. And Saliba at 3.4 million. I've been saying it every week, but I still think that he's the best option in defence from Arsenal. Zinchenko, Gabriel and Ben White started again, so it was our full-strength back line. But Ben White comes in a bit more expensive. Gabriel comes in a bit more expensive. And then Zinchenko's cheaper. But today he went off, I think it was about 3 minutes before the 60th minute. And so he wouldn't have got the clean sheet points based on these new Dream Team rules. So that would be really, really frustrating. I think Saliba playing at centre-back makes him a lot safer from rotation or mid-game substitutions. So Saliba at 3.4 million, I think, is the best option. And he's now the 2nd highest scoring defender in the game. So I think personally that Saliba's the best option. He'll play Tottenham. He probably won't play Brentford. We've got Kivior that can come in that one. or even Tomiyasu at centre-back, so I don't think he'll start that game, but I definitely think he'll start that Tottenham game, no doubt about it. Then someone that's really excited me this week is Trossard at 2.8 million. Now, I would have rather Martinelli hadn't got injured and we didn't have to see Trossard, but Martinelli went off after celebrating his goal that was disallowed in that Everton game. But Trossard came on, 2.8 million he'd cost you, so he's a real budget player. And he's starting now for Arsenal, but he's got 18 points this game week. So he came on in that Everton game. I didn't think he looked that great when he came on, to be honest with you, but then he scored a really great goal at the end, and the match-winning goal as well. And then in this game tonight, he started again, so not quite back-to-back starts, but he's played both games, and he got 1 goal and 1 assist this evening, so he looks really, really good. And I expect him to start every sort of, I say serious game. I think we'll rotate heavily for that Brentford game, but I do expect him to start all of the bigger games. Bournemouth, I expect him to start. Tottenham, I expect him to start. Man City, I'd expect him to start, maybe until Martinelli comes back into the squad. The Brentford game in the EFL Cup, I'm not so sure, but every other game, if Martinelli is out, I think Trossard starts on that left-hand side. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention, and it's not a player to target, but I think it's more of a position to avoid from Arsenal. David Raya has now started back-to-back games for Arsenal, and he started it well with 2 clean sheets. Feel a little bit disappointed for Ramsdale. I mean, he got us into the Champions League, but Arteta's shown that he is ruthless. He wants to win, and he thinks that David Raya is the better keeper, I imagine. Although he keeps saying in interviews that he sees the goalkeeper position like any other position, where he will rotate based on who he thinks is the best goalkeeper for that game. Whether or not I believe it, or if I think that he is just trying to keep Ramsdale motivated, I'm not completely sure. But the way I've seen De Zerbi rotating his keepers, I think we might see Arteta doing something similar. So for now, I would completely avoid the goalkeeper's position for Arsenal, just to be safe. I'm then going to come on to Liverpool. And like I said, this is being recorded before the Europa League games have taken place. So I feel I'm a bit limited on who I can say to target so far in this one, because I don't know what sort of team they're going to put out against LASK, I think they're called. They play them tomorrow evening. Then they have West Ham at home and then Leicester at home in the EFL Cup. Now, for what I remember, Liverpool always heavily rotate in the EFL Cup. So I don't think Salah will play in that game, which makes me lean towards thinking that he could play in this Europa League game. I mean, these players are used to playing twice a week. I really don't think they need to be rested that much this early in the season. It would make sense to me if he played, got them ahead, and then went off in like the 60th minute or something like that. Maybe the 61st, so we get the 2 points for the appearance. But I think Salah at 6.6 million is still a good option, and I'm going to be holding him. I think I'll probably still hold him even if he does get subbed off, because I do think their run of fixtures does look good. They've got West Ham at home, Leicester at home in the EFL Cup, Tottenham away. I think it's, I was going to say Union Berlin, but it's Union St. Gilloise, I think that's pronounced. I'm not sure if I've got that right. But then they're away at Brighton. And then this game week 9 is the one that I really like the look of. The double game week in game week 9. Everton at home and then Toulouse at home, followed by Nottingham Forest at home. So they look like 3 really good home fixtures. And just as long as Salah is still playing midweek, I think I'll still be holding him all the way through to game week 10 personally. I don't expect him to be rotated that much, maybe just in that EFL Cup game. So hopefully he does play in the EFL Cup and it'll be a bonus. But I just think that I want to have this 2 premium structure with Haaland and Salah up top. He's got 2 goals and 4 assists for the season, but he's just such a consistent point scoring dream team. So Salah is someone I'm going to want to keep in my squad at 6.6. But maybe you just want to have a look and see if he does play this Europa League game before you decide whether you put him in or not. As for Liverpool strikers, obviously they've got a lot to choose from. They've got Jota, they've got Gakpo, and they've got Darwin Núñez at 3.9 million. He didn't start the last game, and I think they looked a little bit lost in that first half against Wolves. But when Darwin came on, he made Salah play a lot better. He causes chaos. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists so far this season, and I think he probably is going to start tomorrow night. He didn't start in the Premier League, so I think there probably is a good chance that he starts this Europa game. And also following up with that, so in game week 6, West Ham and Leicester in the Cup. He scored against West Ham in the home leg last season, if you think that counts for very much. And it looks like because they do have so many options up top with Gakpo, Jota, and obviously they have Luis Diaz on the other side as well. I do think there's a good chance that maybe he plays like 60 odd minutes, 70 odd minutes in West Ham game and then gets minutes off the bench in the Cup game as well. So I think that Núñez could be a good cheap option. It's just whether or not at 3.9 million you can stretch to maybe getting an Alvarez instead. But I do think that he should be someone that could be considered. And then I'm going to go to Szoboszlai. I've been a big fan of him so far this season at 3.7 million. He's got the most bonus points for Liverpool with 7, and he's got 1 goal, 1 assist so far. The price point I think is maybe a little bit high, but I do think that he's going to be someone that starts the majority of games for Liverpool. As for defenders for Liverpool, I think it's a little bit harder to decide at the minute. They did have Gomez start the last one. They had a player called Quansah at 1.4 million who done alright, one of the younger players. Went off with cramp at the end, but I think he should be fine. And then they started with Matip and Robertson, who Robertson got 10 points as well. So with Trent Alexander-Arnold injured, I think I'd probably still go for Virgil van Dijk or Robertson. I do think there's a good chance that Robertson gets rotated in this Europa League game tomorrow evening, but then should probably play that West Ham game. But then Tsimikas probably plays in the EFL Cup, so I think it's going to be hard to find a Liverpool defender that plays twice a week. And even with Virgil van Dijk, he's had a few games out suspended, so they probably want to get minutes into his legs. He's probably fresh, so maybe he starts in the Europa League and starts the Premier League game, but I don't think he'll start the EFL Cup game. So again, there are other options with Trent out injured, but it's just whether or not you think they're going to start 2 games. I think it's going to be hard to find a Liverpool defender that would play both the West Ham game and the Leicester game. Personally, I really don't like targeting these EFL Cup games because of all the rotation, but if you are feeling a little bit risky, Gakpo and Jota probably do have the potential to hit big numbers in this EFL Cup game, but personally it's not something I would target myself. On to Manchester United, and they lost 4-3 to Bayern Munich this evening. I quickly caught up with the highlights, but I was watching Arsenal. I expected them to lose heavily, but actually I didn't expect them to score 3 goals. I probably did think they might concede 4 like they did, but to actually go on and score 3 goals was pretty impressive from them. They've actually had a tough time recently, and I've seen a lot of people turning on them in terms of Dream Team assets like Bruno and like Rashford. But I would really give it some serious consideration if you are looking to take out Rashford or Bruno, because I do think that their luck will change with the change of the fixtures. So obviously Bayern's out of the way now, but they face Burnley away from home. Obviously Burnley didn't do very well against Spurs. They shipped quite a few goals against Manchester City as well, and I do think that Manchester United can hurt them. They play a pretty high line, and players like Haaland or Rashford can get in behind, so I do think they could be a good team to target in game week 6, and you could take advantage of it while people are taking Man United players out. I do think there's a good chance they'll do well in this double game week. So Burnley away from home, and then Crystal Palace at home in the EFL Cup. They then have another game against Crystal Palace in the Premier League at home, and then Galatasaray at home in game week 7. So they play actually 4 home games in a row if you count Crystal Palace, Galatasaray, and then Brentford in the Premier League in game week 8. So I do think the fixtures look good, and they're playing a few games at home as well. So I do think they will turn it around, and that's why I think Bruno Fernandes, I think most people did start with him in their team, and I will be holding him personally. I know a lot of people are looking to take him out. On the Dream Team Tonic podcast, that was one of the big Patreon questions we had in what to do with Bruno Fernandes, and personally I would keep him. 6.1 million, he probably is going to go down in price, and I think that's the thing that's frustrating people the most. The price changes have been really harsh this season. He got 8 points this game week, and I think he probably will still go down based on that, so he's probably going to dip under 6 million now, which is disappointing considering he started at 6.5. But he got 1 goal and 1 assist so far this season. And I just think with him, you just got to look ahead and not backwards, because they have played Brighton and they have played Bayern. But the fixtures do really turn nicely for them. So I think that he'll be pretty good. And he got an assist right at the end for a Casemiro goal. So maybe he'll be feeling a little bit confident going into this run. Rashford at 5.8. I think the same applies. I would still hold on to him if you have him. Maybe unless you're looking to swap to Alvarez. But with Bruno and Rashford, I think Man United do rotate a lot less in the Carabao Cup compared to some teams. And I do think that Bruno and Rashford will start that game. They do have a lack of options. They've got a lot of injuries. And what's the best way to sort of get out of a slump? If they beat Burnley, they'll want to keep the momentum going and beat Crystal Palace. So I think Bruno and Rashford are still fairly good people to hold on to, or even bring into your team if you're looking to gain an advantage. Rashford, it seems a little bit doom and gloom, but he's got 14 points so far this game week, which isn't terrible considering it was against Brighton and Bayern Munich. And he's on 1 goal, 2 assists for the season, which maybe we expected a little bit more. This one, I think, is a much harder sell, and I'm going to go on to the Man United defence, and I'm going to go on to Reguilon, the new signing, or loan signing, I think, from Spurs. But it's just 2 million now, or costs you 2 million, and they've got a lot of injuries. So they've got Wan-Bissaka out, they've got Luke Shaw out, they've got Malacia out. They really do have a lack of options. Today in the Bayern Munich game, their whole squad defenders consisted of Lindelof, Martinez, Varane, Dalot, Reguilon and Evans. So really not many options there. Just the 2 fullbacks, unless you want to say Lindelof can fill in. And that's why I think Reguilon could be nailed, even for this for this Carabao Cup game against Crystal Palace. Burnley, Crystal Palace, Galatasaray and Brentford, followed by Sheffield United. I think that's FC Copenhagen, and then all the way in game week 10 they play Manchester City. So if Luke Shaw is still injured, I think he's due back maybe around that game week 9 period, but I think Reguilon is going to play a big chunk of these games. And while they have conceded 7 goals in 2 games, which sounds ridiculous, you wouldn't normally target a team that's got 7 goals conceded in 2 games, but it was Brighton and it was Bayern. These teams can score past anyone, so I think I'm willing to just write off that Brighton game, write off the Bayern game, and look ahead to these fixtures. And I think Reguilon will be a very good enabler for this run, and someone that I'm going to consider bringing into my team. One last thing to say about Reguilon, considering the 2 games he's had, I guess he probably was going to make a few tackles against Bayern and Brighton. He made the tackle points in both, and he also got 1 bonus point in both of these games, so not all doom and gloom. Dalot at 3 million, he's obviously going to be playing on the other side while Wan-Bissaka is out. I think he's an okay option. There's not any sort of rotation risk, I don't think, due to lack of options. But I just think to save yourself 1 million, I'd go Reguilon personally. Then on to Newcastle. Like Arsenal, another team back in the Champions League. And also like Arsenal, another team to keep back-to-back clean sheets. We pointed out game week 5 as the point where Newcastle's fixtures turned and it looked better for their defenders. And they've delivered with 2 clean sheets. So really, really good week for Newcastle. And I really wouldn't underestimate the confidence boost you get from keeping back-to-back clean sheets. I really do think they're going to kick on now, and they've got the best fixture possible, in my opinion, to kick on with Sheffield United in the Premier League. So I think there's a good possibility they can keep another clean sheet. It then gets a little bit tougher, and we see this with the Newcastle fixtures. It looks like a good game followed by a tough game. They've got Sheffield United followed by Man City at home in the Carabao Cup. Now, I'm not sure how tough that game is going to be. I know it's always hard against Man City, but it just depends how much Man City rotate. If Newcastle end up taking it really seriously and playing a full strength side, or nearly full strength, and then Man City do make a lot of changes, bring guys in like Rico Lewis, for example, they've got Oscar Bob, or make quite a few changes, play Calvin Phillips, maybe there's a chance that Newcastle could do something against City in that one. Then they've got Burnley at home, PSG at home, West Ham away. And then they've got in game week 9, which is one that I was looking to play my booster in, Crystal Palace at home and Dortmund at home. and then in game week 10 they face Wolves. So overall, from game week 6 to game week 10, I do think this fixture run does look good, even though they do have a couple bad Champions League games. That being said, the first person I'm going to talk about targeting is Kieran Trippier at 5.2 million. And now he's getting nearer to where we expected him to be, which is he's now joint second highest scoring defender in the game. And I expect he's probably going to be the top very soon with these double game weeks coming up. Like I said, I'm unsure what he'll do with the EFL Cup lineup, because they do have a bit of options on both sides. They've got Hall on the left-hand side and they've got Livramento on the right. So maybe Trippier's earned a rest, but if he has earned a rest, I think it'll be in that Manchester City game in the Carabao Cup. I think they'll want to win that Sheffield United game, and although he is getting on a little bit, I think Kieran Trippier does seem to be quite a resilient player when it comes to fitness, so I expect Trippier still to start. And I mentioned he's second highest scoring defender on the game. He's got 10 bonus points as well, which is the most of any defenders on the game as well. And he hasn't got any attacking returns yet. So as soon as those attacking returns start to return like they did last season, I think he's going to be right up there. And he's someone that I'm going to want in for my potential game week 9 park the bus. Below Trippier, we do have some cheaper alternatives with Fabian Schär at 3.8, Botman at 3.8, and Big Dan Burn at 3.4 million. I think they're all pretty good options. And if you find that 5.2 is a bit hard to get to from Kieran Trippier, I would still look at getting one of these cheaper options in. I'm a bit gutted. I don't think that I'm going to be able to do it yet. But I do plan to get Trippier in for game week 9. And then if the budget doesn't quite seem to work, I'd have no problem going to Fabian Schär, Botman or Burn instead. Personally, I think that Fabian Schär probably is the best option myself. That's because last season I think he seemed to perform better than the other ones. He loves a long distance shot. He feels like a good attacking option from corners. And also, Botman's just come back from an injury, so maybe there's more chance he gets rotated. And also, Dan Burn's got a really good replacement in Hall on that left-hand side. Or even I think Livramento can play on that side as well. So I think that probably Schär is the person that's most likely to keep their position for both fixtures. There might be rotation, but I think Schär's probably the safest pick and the best pick in my opinion. Then two goalkeepers, Nick Pope at 3.9 million. Now my team still isn't set up ready to have an expensive goalkeeper. I very much still have a budget goalkeeper in my team, but Pope at 3.9 million is now the highest scoring goalkeeper in the game, and he has 30 points, and we just know that he's safe from rotation in these sort of Champions League games. I think the Champions League keepers are a bit safer to predict, maybe not Arsenal now, but the Europa League ones, because they haven't played, I'm still not completely sure which goalkeepers are going to play. He made 8 saves against AC Milan, and actually that made me think, despite this run being a bit like good fixture, bad fixture, Man City at home, Paris Saint-Germain at home, and Borussia Dortmund at home, while they're really tough fixtures, they could provide him with save points, and he got 8 saves against Milan. So if he can get a clean sheet, that's a brilliant bonus, but if he can just pick up a few saves, that'll be really good as well. So I think Pope at 3.9 million could be considered. And then one last person I'm going to mention, but it's more of a don't bring him in, is Anthony Gordon. He looks like he's starting a big chunk of games at the minute, but he loves to give people a kick in, and he's on 4 yellows already this season. So he's 1 yellow card away from being suspended, which is why I would advise you probably to avoid Anthony Gordon at this point. I think that's 4 yellows in the Prem, and I'm pretty sure he picked up a yellow in the Champions League as well. So dirty Anthony Gordon. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or any other podcast platforms, please do give us a follow on there as well. And I also want to mention that I'm partnered with the Dream Team Tonic podcast. We did an episode last weekend, which is now available for everyone to get for free on YouTube or podcast platforms. We do these podcasts once a week with our Patreon members, where they ask questions, we answer them, give our thoughts on all the topics. But that episode is out now, so check that one out. It'll be in the link in the description below. Right, on to Brighton, who got the 3-1 win away at Manchester United, and they've been brilliant this season. But they're so good, but I'm starting to worry about their fantasy assets at the minute. So they're almost so good that they've now built a squad where there's quite a bit of rotation. I've mentioned they're rotating their keepers quite a bit. They rotated or rested Estepinian, who's a very popular defender, although he did play 180 minutes in the international break. Solly March, however, didn't play the international break, but was still rested for that game against Manchester United, and I don't think that was an injury, so he's probably just been rested for this Europa League game, which makes me think I've got Matoma in my team, and if March is getting rested now and again, Matoma probably is going to get rested now and again as well. So I think if you've got a Brighton defender, there's a very good chance that they might get rotated 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 games, which is fine. They do deliver a lot of points, but it just is starting to make me a little bit put off by the Brighton assets. Obviously, they've got, like, for Matoma, this I've brought up on the screen a predicted lineup from Who Scored, and they seem to think that Ansu Fati might start on the left-hand side, Pedro could start at 10, and Adingra on the right wing, which would mean March and Matoma being rested, which I don't think is going to happen. But when there is that much depth in the team, it's not great for your assets. So I'm just starting to worry a little bit about my Brighton players. Like I said, I'm recording this before the Europa League game, so you're going to know probably if your player, midfielder, Estepinian started in that game. But game week 6, it then becomes a bit tougher as well. So they've got Bournemouth at home, which looks like a great fixture, but you're going to be gutted if your midfielder doesn't start that one. So yeah, it's tough. And then Chelsea away from home in the Carabao Cup looks like a good game. But then I think it gets a bit harder for Brighton as well. So game week 7, Aston Villa away from home and Marseille away from home look like tough games. Liverpool at home, followed by Manchester City. Again, 2 tough fixtures, but we do know Brighton can score past anyone and beat anyone at the minute. And then that other game week 9 fixture, they had Man City at the start of game week 9, they have Ajax at the end of game week 9, and then Fulham at home in game week 10, and then it starts to get a little bit better. So yeah, I think we are going to still want Brighton assets in our team, but I just wouldn't load up too much because I do think they're going to disappoint us gradually. So yeah, that's my concerns with Brighton. If you've got Estepinian, I'd still probably keep him. If he plays AEK Athens, I'd probably still consider bringing him in. Matoma, March, Gross are the best midfielders for Brighton, and I think you're fine to keep hold of one of them, but like I said in the last episode, I think you're just going to get disappointed. Maybe 1 in 2 games or 1 in 3 games. It's up to you whether or not you're willing to cope with that. But I feel more passionately about the strikers. You've got Evan Ferguson, you've got Danny Welbeck, and you've got João Pedro. They're all scoring goals at different times. They're all rotating mid-game. And at the minute, I just wouldn't want to target any of them. Until we start to see there's one Brighton player that's starting week in, week out, I won't be going there. I think Ferguson should be that guy. I think Ferguson should be playing twice a week. But until he does, even though he's only about 3 million, I won't be bringing him in. Then on to West Ham. So another team that I don't know how they're going to line up in this Europa League game. But for Liverpool, I imagine they're going to probably go full strength. But that is a tough fixture. So I think they'll be fine for the attacking assets and the midfielders. But I really wouldn't want to have a defender for this one. If I do go to the defenders first, I think Zuma is a really good option at 2.5 million. Big threat from set pieces. I think he probably will play Europa 2. We'll find that out by the time you've watched this video. But I just think I'd wait until this Liverpool game is out of the way before I start targeting the likes of Zuma and Areola. If they do play in Europa League, I will be bringing them in, or considering bringing them in after this Liverpool game is out of the way. Because they play Liverpool, they probably will rotate heavily then for Lincoln City, who I apologise, I called them Lincolnshire in the last episode. So Lincoln City in the Carabao Cup. But then Sheffield United at home looks good. SC, I forgot their name, but that's probably an okay fixture if they are starting the likes of Areola and Zuma. Newcastle at home, Villa away, Olympiacos away. I think that's going to be a tough game. But then Everton at home. Everton do look pretty poor at the minute. So I do think that once Liverpool's out of the way, this fixture run does look pretty good for West Ham. So I'll start to consider Zuma and Areola once the Liverpool game is out of the way. But onto the attackers, Bone at 4.9 million. I do think that Liverpool game, Liverpool will play a high line. They are quite attacking, but they do leave space in behind. And I do think that Jarrod Bowen could be quite a good option. He's got 3 goals, 1 assist so far this season. If I had him, I'd probably just hold on to him. But at 4.9 million, I do think there are cheaper alternatives and players that could probably match what he does. So I wouldn't specifically bring him in, but if you do have him already, I think I would probably keep hold of him. James Ward-Prowse at 3.8. Now this is a tempting one. So he's got 2 goals and 3 assists so far this season, and he's got an attacking return in every single game he's played. A great threat from corners. I mentioned Zuma. He does put in a great corner, and then they've got Zuma and I think it's Aged, who seem to do a good job of getting on the end of those. So I do think he's going to continue getting assists from these set pieces. Paqueta is another person I'm going to mention at 3.4 million, but I think I feel the same with Paqueta. He's made the most tackles out of any Dream Team player with 21, and he seems to be one of these that picks up points in a variety of ways. He's on 30 points so far, but at 3.4 million, I've mentioned a few other options at the minute, but I do think someone like Trossard at 2.8 probably is better value for money in my opinion. On to Aston Villa, and they've got some really, really good options. I'm excited to see how they get on against Legia Warsaw in that Europa League Conference game, because I do think that Emery's going to go quite strong. But in game week 6, they have Chelsea away from home and then Everton at home, which I do think is a pretty good double game week. And I just think Emery seems to take these competitions, cup competitions, quite seriously. So I'm intrigued to know what he does with the lineup. I think Diaby at 3.5 million is a really good option. He's sort of playing second striker at a minute, and he's involved in quite a lot. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists. He's 3rd overall for big chances created. And yeah, just playing second striker, I think he's going to get a ton of chances. If he does play in Europa League as well, that's going to make him an even better option. Their run looks pretty good. Legia Warsaw, Chelsea, Everton, Brighton, Zurinska Modstar, who I kept calling Zurich in the last episode, Wolves away, West Ham at home, AZ Alkmaar away, and then Luton in game week 10. So I do think this is a really, really good run of fixtures for Aston Villa, and I think Diaby will do well in it. Defensively, I've got Matty Cash in my team at 2.8 million, and I think he was unlucky to come away with just the 4 points in the last game. Really getting forward quite a lot. He had a few missed kicks. He headed one over the bar. I do think they look really good. He put a good cross in for Ollie Watkins as well, who just can't seem to score at the minute. But I do think that Matty Cash is going to do really well in this run of games. Digne is someone that we mentioned also in, I think, the previous episode as someone to potentially target, but I was a bit worried about Moreno. We'll see in this Legia Warsaw game if Moreno gets a start. But if Digne continues to get the starts at 2.2 million, he does look like a really good option as well. He's getting more attacking returns than Cash. He's doing really well from assists. But I just don't know if it's a long-term pick if Moreno does get his place back. And then I'd probably say he's my 3rd favourite pick in defence, but I still think he's perfectly good to go for, and that's Concert at the back at 2.5 million. I think they've only got Longley and Pau Torres as centre-back options, and Concert can play centre-back and right-back at 2.5 million, so I think he could be a good option as well. Ollie Watkins, he's moved down the pecking order for me now at 4.2 million. He's getting assists, but he's not quite getting goals, and I think I'd just prefer to go for Julian Alvarez. So those are the players I think are best to target for game week 6. Now I'm going to come on to game week 6 plans for my team. So in the last episode, I talked about my idea for having a park the bus booster being used in game week 9, and I still am looking at having that as my plan. However, there's been a few things that have cropped up in the past week or so that are making me change my plans slightly. So as much as I like to plan these things out, I'm not immune to fear of missing out or a little bit of a tinker here and there. And the things that have really changed my opinion this week is Reguilon at 2 million. Because if you remember, I was looking at Kaminsky from Luton in goal, which was a risky tactic, but it was a way that I was going to save budget in my team. With Reguilon being 1 million cheaper than Wan-Bissaka, who I was looking to bring in that does give me a bit more wiggle room elsewhere. So I think Reguilón is someone I'm going to look to bring in. And although I want to move to a 5 at the back to play this park the bus chip, I really can't ignore Alvarez any longer, in my opinion. He's absolutely smashing it. I think it's not just... We've seen with some people that, well, Son, for example, or Sterling, they had a good game or a couple good games, and we all jumped on them. Julian Alvarez, he's done it pretty much all season. 5 points, 7 points, 6 points, 12 points, 8 points, and 21 points. He's pretty much done it every game this season. So I just can't ignore him any longer. So Reguilón and Alvarez are 2 players that I'm looking to bring in my team for game week 6. But it does change the way I look at my plan a little bit. So I'll start by going with my team so far this game week. And like I said, I'm recording this after the Champions League games, but we haven't had the Europa League games yet, so it could change. But I've got Sanchez with 9 points. Estepinian still could have a game to play, but he didn't play the last one. Saliba's got back-to-back clean sheets, so he's got me 15 points. Matty Cash got me 4, and he's going to play tomorrow. Bruno Fernandes is on 8 points, so sort of salvaged it a little bit with that assist late on against Bayern. Bukayo Saka with a massive 17 points. Really happy with how he's done. And then Matoma is on 3 points for the game week, but could play against Athens. Phil Foden, slow start in that West Ham game, but he finished up on 10 points for the game week. So pretty good performance from Phil Foden this week. Mohamed Salah on 9. Fingers crossed he'll play in the Europa League. And then my captain Haaland has got me 40 points, so can't really complain about that. And then Visser, 2 points again for him. And he's someone who I just need to get out of my team. So yeah, on to my transfer plans then. So I'm looking to move Visser out for Reguilón. Saving myself 0.4 with that transfer. And bringing in another defender. So Reguilón's probably someone that I'm going to look to bring into my defence, and then keep him all the way through to that park the bus chip if everything does go to plan. But the one that I've sort of changed my mind on is now bringing in Julian Alvarez. Now, I just think that I have to bring him into my team. He's doing so well with Man City as well. They always score a ton of goals, and it looks like if I do bring in Alvarez, I've got Alvarez, Foden and Haaland. And if they're scoring goals, you've got to think that one of them players is going to be involved in it. And if you're lucky enough, you're going to get 1 goal scorer and 1 assister. So Foden, Alvarez and Haaland in my team, that looks really good on paper to me. I'm going to take out Matoma, it looks like. Now, this is all obviously before the European games. So obviously if Matoma goes on to get a hat-trick or something in the Europa League game, obviously I might start to change my mind a little bit, but this is what I'm going to go with for now. Reguilón and Alvarez in for Visser and Matoma. Now the only downside of this is I'm now changing formation from a 3-4-3 to a 4-3-3, but I've given myself another striker, or kept 3 strikers, when really if I'm going to play the part of the bus, you can only play 5-4-1 or 5-3-2. So at some point I am going to have to lose a striker if I'm going to play a park the bus in game week 9 with 5 defenders. So that is just one thing to consider. It's made it a little bit less practical for me with my formation. But what I was looking at potentially doing now, because if I look at this team, Sanchez, Estepinian, Saliba, Cash, Reguilón, Bruno, Saka, Foden, Alvarez, Salah, Haaland. You'll be able to see that if you're watching on YouTube, but I look at this team on paper and I'm really quite happy with it, to be honest. All the way through the season, I don't think I've had a bad season so far, but I've looked at things in my team and not liked it. But I'm looking at this team now and I think that looks set up really, really nicely. Now, it's making me wonder, we can now roll transfers, and I did think that was a stupid idea. I couldn't see a situation where I would roll transfers. But if I go into game week 6 with this team, and it looks like everyone delivers to some sort of extent, would I be willing to roll a transfer instead of making transfers to move towards my 5 at the back, part of the bus in game week 9? Because what I could actually do is, this could be my team for game week 6. If it goes to plan, game week 7, I might not want to make any transfers, and then I could have 3 transfers going into game week 8. And then if it's still looking okay, going into game week 9, I could have 4 transfers. And before game week 9, we have an international break as well. And that's the one thing that's worrying me about the game week 9 park the bus, is that with an international break, you do get some dodgy lineups or you get some injuries. We were pretty fortunate this international break, there weren't too many. But if I do manage to be able to roll the transfers for 2 weeks in a row, it means I could go into that game week 9 with a part of the bus plan and 4 transfers to use, and I could still get to the team that I was looking at previously. And it gives me a bit of wiggle room as well. If it doesn't quite go to plan, I'll have 4 transfers, so I should still be able to move things around. So this can still all change, but I'm starting to lean towards, if this team does well, maybe I'd consider rolling the transfer and trying to keep 4 transfers behind before playing the part of the bus chip in game week 9. Obviously, we're still planning quite far ahead, so things don't go to plan, you get injuries, and I might have to change this last minute. But at the moment, this is my initial plan. Reguilon in for Vissa, Alvarez in for Matoma. Keep this as it is, and I'm considering maybe rolling transfers all the way through to game week 9 and maybe making 4 in a row, like a little mini wild card, before considering playing 5 at the back for the part of the bus chip. Let me know in the comments below if you've started to consider using your chips, or if you've used any already in these set of European fixtures. And I'm going to wrap it up for this episode, so thank you very much for watching. Good luck with the rest of this game week and in game week 6, and I'll be back at the start of next week with a match day recap showing how all of the teams got on in that game week 6 weekend fixtures. And we'll also be going live with the Dream Team Tonic podcast. We've got an episode with Fergie from Fantasy Football Hub joining us on that episode, so Patreon members, you'll get the early access and be able to watch that live, and it'll be out later in the week. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode. Goodbye.